that Chiefs-Ravens game just heartbreaking if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan. Now, going in, the Ravens were the favorites in the game. Just for all intents and purposes, that was their game to win, and they found just about every way they possibly could have to not win that ball game. So, going back and forth throughout the game, there were some great plays on both sides. The Ravens had one touchdown in the game, and it was early on in the first quarter when Zay Flowers had an amazing 30-yard reception from Lamar Jackson after Lamar dodged a bunch of pressure from the Chiefs O-line or D-line, and just an amazing catch. And unfortunately for the Ravens, that was the highlight of the game for them, and it happened in the first 7 minutes. So the final score was 17-10 in favor of the Chiefs, and the Chiefs will be going on to the Super Bowl. They will have the opportunity to be the first team since the Patriots in 2004, 2005 Patriots. That's the last time there was a repeat Super Bowl champion. The Chiefs are looking to make that the feather in their cap that they were the first team to do that since the Patriots. Now, on the note, feathers in the caps, Travis Kelce broke Jerry Rice's all-time record for playoff receptions in this game. And the fact that really his playoff career has only been going on for about 6 years now, and the fact that he was able to break that record so relatively quickly speaks to just how dominant him and Patrick Mahomes have been over the last 6 years. They're looking to have potentially won 3 of the last 6 Super Bowls. So the Chiefs dynasty continues to go on. It will officially be a dynasty if they win this Super Bowl next month. But so just some major points in the game. Lamar Jackson had one of the craziest plays I've ever seen in my life where he caught his own pass. He went to throw it to a receiver, and one of the Chiefs' D linemen got a hand on it, knocked it way up in the air, and Lamar was able to come down with it and go on to rush for about 7 more yards. Just super mind-blowing play, something I've never seen before. I'm sure it's happened in the grand scheme of things, but just fantastic. Ian Pacheco had so many good drives. Early on in the game, the Chiefs were really trying to make it a point to run the ball to get their run game rolling because, I mean, when you have Patrick Mahomes on your team, you know you're always going to pretty much have the pass game in the bag. So trying to kickstart your own offense early is a really good step to take, and they were able to do so off the back of Pacheco. He had a amazing game. Let me try to see if I can find real quick just exactly how many carries and yards he had. But early on he had 24 carries for 68 yards, just to show you how much they used him in this game. And Kelce, there was one touchdown in the first quarter where he just put on full display how special he is as an NFL talent, because the level of body control it took for him to come down with this ball for somebody his size, it's hard to put into words really, but he was running backwards, had to look over his back, he twisted, did like a complete 180, came down and caught a really low pass, just a fantastic play. Now, the biggest reason the Ravens lost the game was just a lack of discipline. They had two crucial turnovers in the end zone that, had they been able to convert, would have completely changed the trajectory of this game. They had a taunting call preceding one of the fumbles that so what happened was Lamar made a fantastic, another 30-yard throw to Zay Flowers, and Zay came down with it, and they would have been about 10 yards away from the end zone. Well, after Zay comes down with it, he decides to push down on his defender's head to get himself up, And once he gets up, he decides to throw the ball down and flex on the defender while he's still down on the ground. And that cost him 15 yards. So that right there is bad in and of itself. But 2 plays later, Zay Flowers once again messed up. And you can't really say he messed up because it was a great play by the Chiefs defense. But he was the one possessing the ball when he was rushing into the end zone and he fumbled it. Just the Chiefs defender got a hand in there, popped it right out of his hands. And that, if they had converted on that, they would have been down only 3 points with half the fourth quarter to go. Instead, just completely set their momentum back. And then the next drive, once they finally got into scoring position again, Lamar threw a pick, and that, for all intents and purposes, was the game. So had the Ravens been able to play a more disciplined game today, then there's a good chance that the final score comes out different. I mean, in the last 2 minutes, they had a penalty thrown for having too many men on the field. They had an unnecessary roughness call, just a complete lack of, I'm trying to think of the right word, a complete lack of awareness of how much time was left, like just basic football stuff. So they had 8 penalties in the whole game, and their penalties cost them 95 yards, which is essentially the entire length of the field. And when you lose by 1 touchdown, that really hurts. And then the time of possession is just no comparison. The Chiefs completely dominated the football this game. They had the ball for 37 minutes, whereas the Ravens only had it for 22. And Patrick Mahomes actually was on the verge of setting a record for most completions without a miss until he finally got his first miss towards the end of the first quarter. But he hit like 11 in a row at one point. Like, he was just on fire, showing everybody why he's the best quarterback in the league, and he has no rival. And that's one thing. I was really rooting for the Ravens in this game because Mahomes has no rival. He is the undisputed king of quarterbacks in the NFL. And I was really hoping that, because Lamar is going to win the MVP, and if Lamar had been able to beat the Chiefs, beat Mahomes, then he could stake a claim that he's actually a competitor for the title of best quarterback in the league. But Mahomes showed today that there's just no competition. I mean, if you compare the stats, he threw 30 for 39 and had 241 yards and a touchdown, whereas Lamar threw 20 of 37 for 272 yards. He had a touchdown and 1 interception. And then he rushed for 8 carries for 54 yards. But, I mean, that was just Patrick Mahomes was far and away the most dominant player in this game. And it's just once again proven why he's the best player in the league. Now, when it comes to the Lions and the 49ers, that game will start in 4 minutes. I'm banking on the Lions to win. They're the Lions, so anything can happen. That's kind of how it is with the Ravens. I mean, on paper, they should have won that game, but they just have not had good history in the playoffs. And sometimes you can count on just that X factor showing up and leading to bad results more than you can the logical reason that, oh yeah, they should win, but it's the Ravens, so you never know. They'll probably find a way to not win, and sure enough, they did. Now, it got me thinking during the game today, the Mahomes-Kelsey combo, I think, might be on the verge of threatening the Brady-Gronk combo as the greatest in NFL history. Now, I say on the verge. If they win the Super Bowl, they'll only be one behind Brady and Gronk as a duo. Now, Brady is still the GOAT quarterback. Not conversation I'm trying to have. At least not for the next 10 years. But there's a solid argument to be made that Travis Kelce is the greatest tight end of all time. I mean, Rob Gronkowski himself would even say that and has said so on Travis Kelce's podcast, I believe. So it's an interesting conversation. Levi, unfortunately, is busy tonight, so he may be able to tune in towards the end of the stream, maybe not. But I want to wait till he comes in to have that debate or discussion fully. But that's a conversation that is soon to be on the radar. Now, the biggest X factor to that conversation coming to fruition is that two of Brady and Gronk's four rings came at the expense of Mahomes and Kelsey, so they'll always have the edge in the head-to-head matchup. But just food for thought for you on this fine Sunday evening. Now, as far as the logistics of the Lions and 49ers game, it's the first time in NFL history that a number one overall pick quarterback in Brock Purdy is playing against the last overall pick in the draft, quarterback Jared Goff. So that's a fun dynamic to look at in that game. I think it'll be a tight one. I don't think it'll be a better game than the Ravens and Chiefs. I mean, that was just from bell to bell. That it was a fun game. You can't say more than that. There was at one point an administrative timeout, which is a phrase I've never heard before in a football game, because a drone came down on the field or was dangerously close to the field, and they had to call the players off the field to wait for that situation to resolve itself. And whenever they came back from the timeout, the announcers said that it wasn't an NFL drone, so somebody, it seems like, was trying to watch the game for free with their drone and ended up disrupting the entire process. So some other newsworthy things going on there. Now, WWE was all over the news this week for varying reasons. First, on Wednesday, it came out that they signed a 10-year, $5 billion with a B dollar deal with Netflix to stream Monday Night Raw. Well, Raw, because they're not sure if it's going to stay on Mondays, which to me, it wouldn't feel right to have Raw on any other day but Monday. I mean, it's been on Monday for 31 years now, so it would just feel very strange to have it become Tuesday Night Raw or Thursday Night Raw or something like that. But regardless of what day, Raw will begin streaming on Netflix in 2025. Netflix will also have the rights to stream WWE pay-per-views overseas. Peacock still has the right to film in the U.S. for the time being. I would imagine whenever WWE's Peacock deal ends, they would move over to Netflix and just become Netflix exclusive, but you never can tell. But that's massive news for the company. I think it's great to begin the process of easing off of cable and going into streaming. So at the moment, they have 3 shows WWE does that air on television. They have Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, and every one of those shows will be in a different television format. Raw, starting in 2025, will be available through streaming. SmackDown will be available on cable, and NXT will be available just on regular television. Like, you don't need a cable box, just watch it on the CW. So they've definitely been smart in diversifying their portfolio, and it's a groundbreaking step for the company. I mean, $5 billion is never anything to sneeze at. They just got sold for $8 billion like 6 months ago. So between that, they made $13 billion in the last half year, which is always a good business year. Now, The Rock has joined their board of directors for TKO, which means we might be seeing more of him, hopefully. It's always good to see The Rock on WWE television. He never fails to entertain. And unfortunately, that is not the news anybody else was talking about regarding WWE this week, because the top story has been the resurgence of the Vince McMahon controversy regarding inappropriate relations with his subordinates. Now, I don't want to talk about this too much because it's still allegations at this point. We'll wait until actual court happens to go into detail, but the Wall Street Journal published an article detailing a bunch of just horrific allegations against Vince McMahon. Just Brock Lesnar was wrapped up in it too. He was supposed to be at the Royal Rumble last night, but the misconduct allegations were so severe that they had to pull him from the show. Vince resigned his position as executive chairman of TKO. So it was some bad accusations, and Vince McMahon is no longer in a position of power in TKO or WWE. And if those allegations are true, then that is a step in the right direction. But we will wait until he has his day in court and everything gets resolved before we make any definitive statements or talk too far in depth on the subject. Now, Triple H was asked about the subject, and I will not hesitate to criticize his response at the media conference last night because he just gave possibly the worst answer you could possibly give to a question he had to know was coming. So last night was the Royal Rumble, and unfortunately for all the performers out there, the Vince McMahon news was just a dark cloud hanging over the entire event. And it was the massive 6'4" Jack steroided elephant in the room that nobody on the live stream mentioned. But the second the press conference started, that was the first thing anybody got asked was, what was the deal with Vince? And Triple H, instead of giving the PR correct answer that, hey, we found out about it in real time just like you guys do, we were, shocked by the allegations, and WWE will do everything in its power to ensure that we have a safe working environment, and allegations like these will be taken very seriously, and we will do our best to ensure that everything is on the up and up in the environment. And we should instead focus our energy on the great performance made by the guys and girls out there in the ring tonight. That's all I had to say. And he did, in his defense, he did say part of that, in that he said he did talk about how great everybody was in the ring, but he did so in a way that was very dismissive of the Vince stuff at all. What Triple H said, paraphrasing, was that we don't need to talk about that. Let's focus on the positive tonight. And that is just a very tone-deaf thing to say, because that's not how life works. Sometimes you have to sit and have the hard conversations, and you got to talk about the negative sometimes before you can get to the positive. And had the news broken right before he walked out to the press conference, then I wouldn't have faulted him for not being able to formulate an intelligent answer. But the fact that he had 3 days knowing that he was going to do this press conference, you got to come up with a better response than that. Cody Rhodes got asked about it in his press conference, and he gave a 10 times better response than Triple H did. What Cody Rhodes said sounded like somebody who has been an executive vice president of a wrestling company, which Cody Rhodes has. So kudos to Cody for knocking the question out of the park where his boss struck out. And also kudos to Cody Rhodes for winning the 2024 Men's Royal Rumble. It was not the best Royal Rumble in the world. It's kind of boring and slow at times, but he won and became the first person to win 2 consecutive Royal Rumbles since Stone Cold Steve Austin did it in 1997 and 1998. So 26 years is a long time to go without having repeat Rumble winners, and Cody was able to become the first in that time. And he will now go on to wrestle Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania, where he will finally get to finish this story that he has been on for the last 2 years. He should have finished the story last year, but unfortunately for him, they knew they were about to sell the company, and they wanted Roman Reigns to be the face of the company during the sale. So his big moment in the sun at WrestleMania 39 got kiboshed, but hopefully he'll get it this year at WrestleMania 40. Now, WWE did exactly what I said they should. The final two was CM Punk and Cody Rhodes, and it wasn't as high energy as I thought it needed to be. Like, it was basically a 10-minute singles match, but there was no shocking, will they fall off or will they go over the ropes, will they not? Like, no big high spots. It was just kind of an average match that just so happened to end with somebody getting tossed over the rope instead of pinned. But even if I thought they could have done a better job executing the plan, they still came out where they needed to, and that's with Cody Rhodes securing his spot on the road to WrestleMania. Now, moving back to the NFL for a second, Jim Harbaugh has signed with the Chargers, and the Falcons have, in my opinion, made the crucial error in not signing Bill Belichick. Now, instead, the Falcons signed the Ravens defensive coordinator Raheem Morris. And unfortunately for Bill Belichick, it does not seem like there is very high demand for his services. And based on all the reports that I have read about the situation, it boils down to the fact that he still wants to be the general manager, and teams do not want him to hold both roles. And me and Levi talked about this previously. It's hard when you've been accustomed to getting to do both for 20 plus years. It's hard to take that step back, but I don't blame the franchises at all for not wanting a 71-year-old man to be in control of the future of their franchise. I mean, it would make more sense to get a GM who will actually have some stake in that future as opposed to one that probably, if you hire Bill Belichick as your coach, there is a very slim possibility that he will be there longer than the next 5 years. So you want somebody who has a long-term vision as GM. And if Bill Belichick can't accept that delegated role, it doesn't look like he's going to find a coaching opportunity. And maybe that's for the best, because I would hate for him to go and just toil longer than he needs to on mediocre teams just because he's desperate for a job, when he really has no need to be. He's the greatest coach of all time, except for maybe Vince Lombardi, and his legacy is secure. If he retired today, then nobody can cast aspersions on his career, unless you're just a hater. I mean, he's got 6 rings, responsible for one of the greatest dynasties in NFL history, if not the greatest. But I think, that being said, the Falcons, if it was an all or nothing thing between do you let Belichick do both or do you do nothing, I still think they should have gone with Belichick, just because the Falcons have nothing else going on. I mean, they finished 3rd in the NFC South this season. That's one of the worst divisions in football. So for them, I mean, having somebody who is of Bill Belichick's caliber on your team, like, what is wrong with that? I mean, I get it. Like I was just saying, he won't be there in 5 years, but what do you have to lose? Okay, you drop 2 spots in your last in the NFC South. Like, that would arguably be better because then you would get higher draft picks. So there was really no downside to giving Belichick both roles for the Falcons. But reports say that a lot of people were also concerned that if Belichick got hired, then they would lose their jobs. And so they got in Arthur Blank's ear and convinced him to go in a different direction. Now, I mean, I don't know much about Raheem Morris. Maybe he's a fantastic coach for the sake of the Falcons. I hope they are, or I hope he is. But we'll see. And I do apologize. It is the Rams defensive coordinator, not the Ravens. But I don't know, hopefully he does good with the Falcons. And it looks like Bill Belichick might end up as a broadcaster, not as a coach next NFL season. Now, not only did the Falcons not have a good week, the Hawks had a horrendous week because Luka Doncic dropped 73 on them the other day, and he dropped the most points ever scored in an NBA game since Kobe Bryant scored 81 in 2006. So that is just not a distinction that you want to have. Now, despite that, they only lost that game by 5. It was 148 to 143. And scoring inflation happening in the NBA right now is just insane. Like, they're putting up, Joel Embiid scored 70 last week as well. I don't remember who the 76ers were playing, but, I mean, defense just does not exist anymore, which is sad because, I mean, basketball is a two-sided game, and defense, like, that's some of the most fun moments in NBA history are watching monster blocks or hard fouls and things like that, but that's just not the way it seems to go anymore. But that was still, I mean, just absolutely fantastic week for Luka and Joel. Now, look more in depth into Luka's game against the Hawks, where he scored 73. I'm trying to pull up how many threes he hit because I have a running theory that one day Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point NBA record will be broken. And when it is, inevitably, because all records are made to be broken, it will be because somebody just got so ridiculously hot from three that they were able to break 100 points. But it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to pull up Luka's stat line right now. But let's see if I can find Embiid's from the other day. The Lakers and the Warriors also had a fantastic game last night in double overtime, which for the Warriors to go into double overtime and lose to the Lakers like that, I mean, it's a heartbreaking loss, doubly so because Klay Thompson played absolutely pitiful yesterday. The last I saw, he was 1 for 9, which it just shows you, unfortunately, how much injuries have played a toll on him over the last 5 or so seasons. And it's just sad to see the Splash Brothers really take the career route as Dizzy and Dazzy Dean back from the 30s on the Cardinals, in that they were a stud duo for about 5 seasons. Then Dazzy got derailed by injuries and it just became Dizzy. But LeBron had 36 last night. Anthony Davis had 29. And D'Angelo Russell had 28 compared to the Warriors, who just, like I said, Klay Thompson, he ended up having 24 points, which looks good on paper, but his field goal percentage was atrocious. Steph had 46. He was just kind of the shining light in the darkness there. Andrew Wiggins had 22. So he had okay backup, but the percentage is really the important thing when it comes to how well you shoot. And it just wasn't falling for Klay Thompson last night. I mean, even the free throws, if you just look at the difference there, they shot 68% from the free throw line, which for the Warriors, a team that has some of the greatest shooters in history, is just not what you expect. And they also, just the comparison here, the Lakers had 43 total free throws attempted and made 38 of them, whereas the Warriors only shot 16. So the Lakers were just doing a great job getting the ball inside, drawing fouls, and just getting easy free throws. I mean, they're free for a reason. So that has been what has been going on in the NBA. Now, Embiid's stat line, in addition to the 70 points, he also had 18 rebounds and 5 assists, which is just nothing to sneeze at. And Luka, he had 73 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. If he could have just gotten 3 more that would have been an insane 73-point triple-double, which is a phrase I never thought I'd hear myself say, but you never know. I mean, Devin Booker had 50 and 62 last week, so yeah, when people look back at the level of scoring in this era, it will just jump off the charts. Kind of like how when you look back at the 60s, you got Will averaging 50 a game, Oscar Robertson averaging triple doubles. Like, the stats in this era right now are very up from when you compare it to the 90s. And that can lead to one of two things. Either the inflated stats of this era will diminish to an extent how people treat players like Michael Jordan, who played in a league where stats were actually very deflated. Like in MJ's last game against the Jazz, neither team cracked 100 points. I think he scored 45 points, and the Bulls had 96, I believe, against the Jazz. But that, when you compare that with the modern day players, when you have like 4 games, the MJ's last game in Chicago was even less high scoring than I thought. 87 Bulls to 86 Jazz. And MJ in that game scored 45 of his team's 87 points. Now, proportionally, that is impressive. He scored over half of his team's points. If you compare that to Luka, he scored 73, and his team had 148. So proportionally, that's roughly the same. MJ actually scored slightly more of his team's points in proportion than Luka did. So, and on the whole, MJ's 45 in that game statistically carries as much weight as Luka's 73. But in the future, I don't know if people will look into the stat lines with that much nuance, or they might just say that, hey, 73 is better than 45. Obviously, MJ did his in the final, so it counts way more. But just like, either it will show just how impressive it was for players like MJ and Bird and Dominique and Magic to put up their crazy stat lines in an era where nobody was doing that, or it'll just be like, why is it impressive that MJ averaged over 30 points in like 4 different seasons? Devin Booker did it 7 times. So it'll be curious in the long run to see what direction the narrative goes in, and I'm sure the way it'll end up is you'll have the sports talk shows debating that constantly, and you'll have one person representing one direction and one person representing the other. But that is just some more food for thought for you there. Now, the final talking point that I feel like getting into this week is a diversion back to the NFL, and Dak Prescott is finding himself in hot water, not just from Dallas Cowboy fans at large, but from his teammates' families and his own family, sort of. So after that just mind-blowing loss to the Packers 2 weeks ago, CeeDee Lamb's mother went on Twitter and talked about how Dak needs to leave Dallas. There was another, I think Micah Parsons' brother also went out and kind of criticized Dak, or he like complimented everybody but Dak in a post. And it's just being very petty, passive-aggressive Twitter feuds between him and his teammates' families, to the point where Dak's own brother came out and said that he wants Dak to leave Dallas for Dak's sake because it's such a toxic culture over there. Now, it doesn't bode well for you when your teammates' families are openly dissing you on social media because, I mean, granted, they could just be putting out their own thoughts. I mean, their sons and brothers are in the NFL, so surely they've been following football for at least 20 plus years and likely have their own opinions. But I would wager a guess that they're probably hearing that same criticism from their relative on the team, which is enabling them to bolster their own opinions and feel like, oh, if I feel this way, my son, who's an NFL player, also feels this way, my brother also feels this way, might as well post it, which is sadly the logic that a lot of people have these days. Might as well post it, and who cares what the consequences are. But it's not a good look for Dak. And I mean, the teammates, obviously you can only come down too hard on your family, but I feel like if you're an up and coming NFL prospect, you gotta look at your family and say, like, I appreciate any support you want to offer me, but don't criticize my team or my teammates publicly in such a manner, especially when you're the Cowboys and you're arguably the most scrutinized sports team in American sports. It just gives the media fodder to talk about and hype up the dissension in your ranks, which further exacerbates any dissension if it exists. And a lot of times when the media does stuff like that, it can actually create dissension where it didn't previously. So that is just an interesting development that probably won't amount to anything. I mean, Dak, he signed a new contract a couple of years ago, so he's there for at least one more year, but I would not be surprised at all if you start seeing news stories about should the Cowboys trade Dak, which, by the way, Dak has a no-trade clause. So if they did trade him, they would have to coordinate with him where his potential landing spot would be. But that is the news in sports this week. Stay tuned next week, and we will have the Super Bowl will be finalized, so we will spend a lot of time talking about that, in addition to any other breaking news that occurs throughout the week. So we will see y'all next time.